I lost my apartment in a single night and my family in one phone call. When I begged for help, my stepfather said it was not their problem. 7 days later, the insurance company showed me a form with a signature that looked exactly like mine, assigning 100% of the payout to my parents. Then the fire investigator asked the question that made my heart drop. "Who was inside your apartment last week?" My name is Lillian Marshall. I am 32 years old, and until 7 days ago, I was a woman who believed that if you followed the rules, the world would generally let you be. I work as a compliance analyst at Grayford Compliance Partners in downtown Pittsburgh. My entire career is built on the concept of risk assessment, verifying data, and ensuring that nothing falls through the cracks. I am the person who checks the fine print. I am the person who notices when a signature does not match or when a date is off by 24 hours. It is literally my job to see the disaster coming before it happens. Yet, I never saw the smoke until it was choking me. I lived in the Riverview Lofts, a converted industrial building that smelled of old brick and expensive coffee. It was the first place I had ever truly called my own. Purchased with the savings I had scraped together over 5 years of 60-hour work weeks. It was my sanctuary. It was the physical proof that I had escaped the chaotic, suffocating orbit of my family and built something solid. The night it burned, there was no premonition, there was no ominous feeling in the air. I had gone to sleep listening to a podcast about economic theory, boring and safe. When I woke up, the world was orange. The sound was the first thing that registered. A roaring, rushing wind that sounded like a freight train was driving through my living room. Then came the heat. It was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, sucking the oxygen right out of my lungs. I did not think. I did not pack. Panic is a very efficient editor of priorities. I grabbed 2 things from the nightstand, my cell phone and my car keys. I ran out the door barefoot, the hallway carpet already smoking under my feet. Standing on the sidewalk 10 minutes later, shivering in my thin pajamas. I watched my life disintegrate. The fire department arrived. But fire is a hungry animal. By the time the water hit the windows of my unit, the glass had already shattered from the thermal shock. I watched the flames lick up the curtains I had spent 3 weekends sewing. I watched the orange glow consume the corner where my laptop sat, containing every photo I had taken in the last decade. In that moment of absolute devastation, standing amidst the flashing red lights and the smell of wet ash, I did what any daughter would do. I reached for the only people who were supposed to care. I dialed my mother, Dana Ralston. My hands were shaking so hard, I dropped the phone once before I could hit the call button. It rang 4 times. When she answered, her voice was thick with sleep and irritation. I could hear the rustling of sheets. I told her, through sobbing gasps, that the apartment was gone. I told her I was standing on the street with no shoes. I told her I had lost everything. There was a pause, a long, hollow silence where a mother's comfort should have been. Then I heard her exhale. A sharp, annoyed sound. She said, "That is unfortunate." The phone shuffled. She handed it to my stepfather. Kirk Ralston, I thought, for a fleeting, desperate second, that maybe he would be the pragmatic one, maybe he would tell me to come home, that they would wire me money for a hotel, that they were on their way. "Lillian," Kirk said. His voice was flat, devoid of any alarm. "It is 3 a.m. "Kirk, my apartment burned down," I screamed into the receiver, not caring that the neighbors could hear me. "I do not have anywhere to go." "Well," he said, and I will never forget the casual cruelty in his tone. "That sounds like a personal oversight. Not our problem. Be more careful." The line went dead. I stood there, the heat of the burning building on my face and the ice of their rejection in my gut. That was the moment the first crack appeared in my understanding of reality. I thought that was the bottom. I thought that was the worst it could get. Pure, unadulterated apathy. I was wrong. Apathy is passive. What was happening to me was active. 1 week later, the numbness had set in. I was sleeping on a friend's couch, wearing borrowed clothes that were one size too big. I was navigating the nightmare of insurance claims, trying to list every single item I had owned for a purely theoretical reimbursement. Then I got the call from the insurance company. They needed to see me in person. The adjuster on the phone sounded uncomfortable, using phrases like irregularities in the file and procedural verification. I walked into the office expecting a fight about the value of my furniture or the depreciation of my electronics. I sat down across from a man who looked like he had not slept in 2 days. He slid a piece of paper across the desk toward me. It was a change of beneficiary form. "Miss Marshall," he said, watching my face carefully. This form was filed and processed 7 days prior to the incident. I looked at the document. The date stamped on the top was exactly 1 week before the fire. My eyes scanned down to the beneficiary section. The standard default, usually a next of kin or a designated estate, had been overridden. The primary beneficiaries were listed as Dana Ralston and Kirk Ralston. The allocation was 100%. "I did not sign this," I said. My voice sounded small in the quiet office. "I have not updated my policy in 3 years. Please look at the signature," the agent said softly. I looked. The breath caught in my throat. It was my signature. It was not just a close approximation. It was the loop of the L. It was the sharp, aggressive cross of the T in the middle of my last name. It was the way the end of the name trailed off slightly upward. If you had put a gun to my head and asked me if that was my handwriting, I would have hesitated. It was perfect. It was terrifyingly perfect. "If this is valid," the agent said, "the payout for the structural damage and the personal property coverage, which, I should note, was increased to the maximum limit on the same day this form was filed, would go entirely to your parents. We are talking about a sum of nearly $200,000. I felt the room spin. They had not just ignored my call for help. They had set themselves up to profit from my ruin. "I did not sign this," I repeated, firmer this time, though my hands were trembling under the desk. "This is a forgery." The agent nodded slowly. "We suspected as much, which is why we brought in an outside consultant." He gestured to the door, and a man I had not noticed before stepped forward. He had been leaning against the back wall, observing me. He introduced himself as Grant Sloan, a fire investigator. He did not look like the police, and he did not look like an insurance adjuster. He looked like a man who had spent too much time looking at ashes and figuring out how they got there. He had sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to be dissecting my reaction, measuring my shock to see if it was genuine. "Miss Marshall," Grant said. He pulled up a chair and sat next to me, invading my personal space just enough to make me focus entirely on him. "I have been looking at the burn patterns in your unit. The official report is not out yet, but I can tell you what I see. This was not a toaster shorting out. This was not a candle left unattended." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "This was an accelerant," he said. "The fire started behind the entertainment center, near an outlet, but it moved too fast. It burned too hot for a standard electrical fire." I stared at him. "Are you saying someone set it?" "I am saying that accidents happen," Grant said. "But accidents rarely happen 1 week after someone increases the insurance payout and changes the beneficiary to 2 people who live 40 miles away." He opened a folder and laid out a series of photographs, charred wood, melted plastic, and a timeline. "To pull this off," Grant said, his voice lowering, becoming intense, "someone needed access. They needed to know the layout. They needed to know where the sensors were, and they needed to know your schedule." He looked me dead in the eye. "Lillian, I need you to think very carefully. Who was in your apartment last week?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Who was in my apartment? I lived alone. I was private. I rarely had guests. My boyfriend and I had broken up 3 months ago, and he had moved to Chicago. No one had a key except me and the building management. But then, the memory hit me. It was so banal, so seemingly innocent, that I had barely registered it at the time, 5 days before the fire. There had been a knock at my door on a Tuesday evening. I had opened it to find my mother standing there, holding a large black canvas bag. It was shocking because Dana never visited. We spoke on holidays. We texted on birthdays. But she had not set foot in my apartment in 2 years. She had stood there in the hallway, smiling a tight, nervous smile, claiming she was just in the neighborhood and wanted to see how I was doing. I had let her in. Of course I'd let her in. She was my mother. I remembered how she had moved through the space. She had not sat down on the sofa to catch up. She had walked around. She had drifted from room to room. I remembered her standing in the bedroom, looking up at the smoke detector. I remembered her asking, with a strange intensity, if the new building had sprinklers in the units or just in the hallway. I remembered her going into the living room, near the television, near the outlet where Grant said the fire started. She had crouched down, pretending to admire my cable management, touching the wires. She had carried that large black bag with her the whole time. She never set it down. "Oh my God," I whispered. Grant leaned in. "What is it?" "My mother," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "She came over 5 days ago. She said she wanted to see the place." I looked up at Grant, and then down at the forged signature that assigned every cent of my life's value to Dana and Kirk Ralston. I remembered the way she had looked around my apartment. At the time, I thought she was judging my decorating choices. I thought she was looking for dust. She wasn't looking for dust. She was checking the inventory. She was identifying the ignition points. I thought they were just heartless. I was wrong. They prepared for that night, 2:58 in the morning. That was the exact time on the digital clock when the sound tore through my sleep. It was not the polite chirping of an alarm clock meant to wake you for work. It was a scream. The smoke detector above my head was shrieking with a violence that vibrated in my teeth. I sat up, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. For a split second, my brain tried to rationalize it. I thought maybe it was a malfunction or a low battery. Then I inhaled. The air was not air anymore. It was thick, gray, and tasted like burning rubber and melting plastic. I rolled out of bed, my feet hitting the floorboards, and that was when the heat registered. It was not coming from the radiator. It was radiating from the living room door, a physical wall of temperature that made the hair on my arms stand up and singe. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and snatched my car keys purely on instinct. I reached for the bedroom door handle, but my hand recoiled before I even touched the metal. It was radiating heat. I used the hem of my pajama top to turn the knob and threw the door open. The hallway was gone. My living room, the space where I drank my coffee and read my books, had been replaced by a churning, orange tunnel. The fire was not just in one corner. It was rolling across the ceiling like a liquid wave. The sound was deafening, a roar that drowned out even the smoke detector. It sounded like a jet engine was taking off inside my apartment. I did not scream. I did not try to save the laptop with my novel draft or the box of jewelry my grandmother left me. Survival is a cold, singular equation. I turned and ran for the front door. The run was a blur of sensation. My bare feet slapped against the laminate floor, which was already warping from the heat beneath it. I could feel the skin on my face tightening, drying out instantly in the superheated air. I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers slick with sweat and terror, and threw myself out into the corridor of the building. The building alarm was blaring now, a rhythmic, pulsing hoot that echoed off the concrete walls. I scrambled for the stairwell. I was on the 4th floor. I took the steps 2 at a time, my lungs burning as if I had swallowed broken glass. Other doors were opening. I saw faces pale with sleep and fear peering out. But I did not stop to explain. I just kept moving down, 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 until I burst out the heavy steel door at the bottom and into the cool night air of the street. I collapsed on the sidewalk, coughing so hard I saw stars. Someone draped something heavy and scratchy over my shoulders. I looked up to see Mrs. Higgins from apartment 2B. She had thrown an old wool blanket over me. She was wearing a bathrobe and clutching a cat carrier, her eyes wide and reflecting the chaotic lights of the arriving fire trucks. "Look," she whispered, pointing up. I stood up, pulling the blanket tighter around my shivering body, and looked up at the building. It was my window. It was unmistakable, while the rest of the building was dark or flickering with waking lights. My apartment was a torch. A tongue of violent, bright flame punched through the glass of my living room window, shattering it outward. The glass rained down onto the pavement across the street like diamonds, followed by a billow of black smoke that blotted out the stars. I watched my life burn. I watched the curtains I had hemmed ignite and vanish. I imagined my books turning to ash, the pages curling and disintegrating. I imagined the photos of my college graduation, the only copies I had, bubbling and melting into nothing. It happened so fast, in the span of 6 minutes. I went from sleeping in my own bed to owning nothing but a pair of cotton pajamas and a cell phone. A firefighter in full gear walked past me, his face smeared with soot, speaking into a radio. He stopped near the curb where I was standing, not realizing I was the tenant. "Unit 404 is fully involved," he said, his voice crackling with static but clear enough to break my heart. "Structural damage is extensive, nothing left to save in that quadrant. We are moving to containment for the adjacent units. Nothing left to save." The words hit me harder than the heat had. I was 32 years old, and I was effectively erased. I sat down on the curb, the cold concrete seeping through my thin pants. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a shaking that started in my knees and worked its way up to my jaw. I needed help. I needed a voice to tell me that this was a nightmare, or at least that it would be okay. I looked at my phone. It was 3:15 in the morning. I dialed my mother. I knew it was late. I knew they slept with their phones on silent, but the landline in the kitchen was always on for emergencies. I called that number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, there was a click. "Hello?" It was my mother. Dana. Her voice was groggy, laced with the sharp edge of someone who hates being disturbed. "Mom," I choked out. I could taste the soot in my throat. "Mom, it is Lillian." "Lillian?" She sounded annoyed. "Do you know what time it is?" "Mom, my apartment," I sobbed, the dam finally breaking. "There was a fire. It is gone. Everything is gone. I am on the street." There was silence on the other end. I waited for the gasp. I waited for the sound of her jumping out of bed. I waited for her to ask if I was burned, if I was hurt, if I was safe. "Mom," I pleaded. "I do not have anywhere to go. I do not have shoes." I heard her exhale, a long, weary sigh, as if I had just told her I had a flat tire on a Tuesday afternoon. "That is unfortunate," she said. The words were so flat, so devoid of maternal instinct, that I stopped crying. I just froze. "Kirk," I heard her say, her voice muffled as she pulled the phone away from her face. "It is Lillian. She says her apartment burned down." I heard the rustle of the phone being passed. I gripped the device so hard my knuckles turned white. Kirk would be practical. Kirk would tell me to get a hotel, and he would reimburse me. Kirk would be angry about the mess, but he would help. "Lillian," Kirk's voice came on the line. It was crisp, awake, and icy. "Kirk, please," I said. "I am standing on the sidewalk. I have nothing." "Well," Kirk said, "that sounds like a result of poor planning." "What?" I whispered. "We told you that living in the city was a risk," he said, his tone conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "We are not driving 2 hours into the city at 3 in the morning to pick you up because you had an accident. Not our problem. Be more careful." And then he hung up. I sat there, the phone pressed against my ear, listening to the disconnect tone. Beep, beep, beep. It sounded like a heart monitor on a dead patient. They did not ask if I was alive. They did not ask if I was in the hospital. They did not offer a credit card number for a motel. They just told me to be more careful. I lowered the phone and looked at the burning building. The fire was being controlled now, the water arcs hitting the flames and turning them into hissing steam. But the damage was done, and the damage inside me was far worse than the charred drywall on the 4th floor. I do not remember much of the next hour. I remember a paramedic checking my oxygen levels and putting a plastic mask on my face for a few minutes. I remember giving a statement to a police officer who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Then I called Tessa. Tessa Monroe was a colleague at Grayford Compliance. We were work friends, the kind who grabbed lunch together and complained about spreadsheets. But we had never hung out on a weekend. I called her because she was the only person I knew who lived within 5 miles. She answered on the second ring. "Lillian?" she said, her voice clear. "Everything okay?" "My apartment burned down," I said. I had no energy left for emotion. I just stated the fact. "Where are you?" she asked immediately. No questions, no judgment. "Riverview Lofts, on the curb." "Do not move," she said. "I am 7 minutes away." She was there in 6. She pulled up in her Honda Civic, jumped out wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, and walked straight through the police line to get to me. She did not ask what happened. She did not ask if I had insurance. She just wrapped her arms around me, guided me into the passenger seat of her car, and turned up the heat. "I have a guest room," she said as she drove away from the red and blue lights. "It has clean sheets. We can figure the rest out tomorrow." I slept that night in Tessa's guest room, wearing a t-shirt she lent me. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of a house that was not burning, but I could not sleep. My mind kept looping back, not to the fire, but to the week before. Lying there in the safety of a stranger's kindness, the memory of my mother's visit began to play in my head like a high-definition movie. I saw Dana walking into my apartment 5 days ago. I saw the black canvas bag she carried, the one she usually took to the gym, but she was wearing jeans and a blouse. Why bring a gym bag? I closed my eyes and watched the memory. She had been so strange. She had touched everything. She had walked into the kitchen and opened the cabinet under the sink where I kept the cleaning supplies. Why? She had run her hand along the wall behind the television. "These old buildings," she had said, her voice echoing in my memory. "The wiring must be terrible. Do these outlets spark?" I had laughed it off. "No, Mom, it is up to code." She had nodded, but her eyes had not been looking at me. They had been looking at the power strip pushed behind the media console, the exact spot where the fire investigator said the heat originated. I remembered her asking to use the bathroom 3 times in 2 hours. I remembered the sound of her footsteps moving not toward the bathroom, but toward the bedroom where I kept my file cabinet. I remembered coming out of the kitchen with tea and finding her standing by my desk, her hand pulling back quickly from the drawer where I kept my personal documents. "Just looking for a pen," she had said, smiling that tight, practiced smile. At the time, I thought she was snooping. I thought she was being a nosy mother looking for secrets or evidence of a boyfriend. Now, lying in the dark with the smell of smoke still clinging to my hair, a cold realization settled in my stomach. She was not looking for a pen. She was not looking for secrets. She was learning the layout. She was checking the voltage. She was ensuring that when the time came, nothing would stop the fire from taking everything I had. "Not our problem," Kirk had said. He was right. It was not their problem. It was their solution. To understand the fire, you have to look at the ash, but to understand the betrayal, you have to look at the timeline. You have to rewind the clock past the explosion of glass and the screaming smoke detectors. You have to go back to a quiet Tuesday evening, exactly 5 days before my life disintegrated. It was 7 o'clock at night. I had just finished a conference call with a client in London and was heating up leftover pasta. My apartment was quiet, the kind of peaceful silence I had worked very hard to afford. Then, there was a knock at the door. It was not the buzz of the delivery man or the heavy pounding of a neighbor. It was a sharp, confident rap, 3 times. I opened the door and froze. My mother, Dinah Ralston, was standing in my hallway. You have to understand that Dana does not do pop-ins. Dana does not do casual. Every interaction I have had with my mother for the last decade has been scheduled, calculated, and usually involved a neutral location like a restaurant where we could not make a scene. Seeing her standing on my welcome mat in the Riverview Lofts, was as jarring as seeing a polar bear in the middle of a desert. "Lillian," she said, her face arranging itself into a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "I was in the city for an appointment. I thought I would take a chance and see if you were home." She was wearing a trench coat buttoned to her chin, despite the fact that the building heating system was running on overdrive. But that was not what caught my attention. It was the bag, in her right hand. She was gripping the handle of a large black canvas duffel bag. It looked like something you would take to the gym for a heavy workout, or perhaps to the airport for a weekend trip. It was bulky. It looked structured, as if it was not empty. But she was holding it with a strange kind of tension, her knuckles white against the black strap. "Mom," I said, stepping back, my brain scrambling to adjust to this new reality. "I did not know you were coming. Come in." She stepped inside, and the first thing she did was not to hug me. She did not look at my face. Her eyes immediately darted to the ceiling, scanning the corners of the entryway, then swept down to the floor. It was a mechanical, sweeping gaze, like a radar dish searching for a signal. "It is cozy," she said, the words sounding like an insult. "It is home," I said, closing the door. "Let me take your coat. And your bag." I reached for the black duffel bag. Dana pulled it back instantly. The movement was sharp, almost defensive. "No," she said, too quickly. She cleared her throat and softened her tone. "No, do not worry. I have some personal items in here. Fragile things. I will just keep it with me." She walked into the living room and placed the bag on the floor right next to her feet. She did not sit on the sofa. She stood in the center of the room, keeping the bag within touching distance, like a guard dog watching a bone, for the next hour. The air in the apartment felt heavy. I tried to make tea. I tried to ask about Kirk. I tried to be the dutiful daughter who was grateful for a surprise visit. But every time I turned my back, I felt her eyes on me, or rather, on my apartment. "You have a lot of things," she commented. Walking over to my bookshelf, she did not look at the titles of the novels. She looked at the electronics I had shelved there, my Bluetooth speaker, my backup hard drive, my digital camera. Her eyes seemed to be clicking, tallying, estimating value. 1 speaker, 2 drives, 1 camera. "It is just stuff, Mom," I said, handing her a mug of tea. She took the tea but did not drink it. She set it on a coaster and walked toward the window that would, 5 days later, blow out onto the street. "Do you have cameras?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "Cameras," she repeated, turning to face me. "Security cameras, nanny cams. You live alone in the city, Lillian, a young woman. You should have cameras inside the apartment." "I have the building security," I said. "And the door has a peephole. I do not need to record myself watching Netflix." "Mom." She stared at me for a beat too long. "So, no cameras inside? Nothing recording the living room or the bedroom?" "No," I said. "Why?" "I worry about you," she said. The lie was smooth, polished like a stone. "I just want to make sure you are safe. What about smoke detectors? Are they battery-operated or hardwired into the building's electricity?" It felt like a quiz. It felt like an inspection. But I was so desperate for her approval, so desperate to show her that I was a responsible adult who could take care of herself, that I answered her. "They are hardwired," I said proudly, "but they have battery backups. I check them every 6 months." "Good," she whispered. She looked up at the white plastic disc on the ceiling. "That is good to know," then began the wandering. "I need to use the restroom," she announced. She went down the short hall. I heard the bathroom door close. I sat on the sofa, scrolling through my phone, trying to calm my nerves. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I stood up, worried she might have felt ill. As I walked toward the hallway, I heard a sound that stopped me cold. It was the distinct, metallic shunk of a drawer sliding open on rollers. It was not coming from the bathroom. It was coming from my bedroom. My bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open gently. Dana was not in the bathroom. She was standing by my nightstand. She had pulled the top drawer open, the drawer where I kept my jewelry, my passport, and my spare car keys. "Mom?" I said, my voice sharp. She jumped. She slammed the drawer shut so hard the lamp on top of the table rattled. She spun around, her face flushed. "I got turned around," she stammered. "I was looking for extra toilet paper. The roll in there is low." My bathroom was across the hall. The linen closet was in the bathroom. There was absolutely no logical reason for her to be in my bedroom, digging through my nightstand for toilet paper. "The toilet paper is under the sink." "Mom," I said slowly. "Right." "Of course," she said. She brushed past me, smelling of cold air and expensive floral perfume. She went into the bathroom and locked the door. I stood in my bedroom, heart pounding. I checked the drawer. Nothing seemed to be missing. My grandmother's ring was still there. My passport was there, but the papers, a stack of receipts I had saved for taxes, were shuffled. Someone had riffled through them. She came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, composed, the mask of the sweet mother back in place. "I should get going," she said. "Kirk worries when I drive late." She went back to the living room and picked up the black canvas bag. She lifted it with a grunt of effort. Whatever was inside was heavy. "It was good to see you, Lillian," she said. "You too." I lied. I walked her to the door. As she stepped out into the hallway, she paused. She looked back at me, then past me, into the apartment one last time. It was not a look of love, it was a look of finality. It was the look a demolition expert gives a building before hitting the plunger. "Be careful with those outlets," she said, pointing vaguely toward the kitchen. "They look overloaded." "They are fine." "Mom," I said. She nodded, the corner of her mouth twitching. "Goodbye, Lillian." She walked toward the elevator, the black bag thumping against her leg. I watched her go, a strange, cold prickle rising on the back of my neck. I locked the door, all 3 locks. I tried to shake off the feeling. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself she was just awkward, that she was just trying to be a mother in her own clumsy, intrusive way. But the apartment felt different after she left. It felt violated. I walked into the guest room, which I used as a home office. I sat down at my desk to check my email, trying to return to normalcy. That was when I noticed the filing cabinet. It was a heavy 2-drawer metal cabinet tucked into the corner. I kept it locked, the key hidden in a pencil cup. The cabinet was sitting at a slight angle. I knew exactly how that cabinet sat. I vacuumed around it every Saturday. It was always parallel to the wall. Now, the left corner was pulled out about 2 inches, as if someone had tried to move it or jarred it while trying to open it. I reached for the key in the pencil cup. It was there, but it was upside down. I always dropped it in bow side up. My hands started to shake. I unlocked the cabinet and pulled open the bottom drawer. The drawer labeled financial insurance. The hanging folders were there, but the green folder labeled renter's insurance was not in its alphabetical spot. It should have been behind retirement, but it was stuffed in the front, wedged before bank statements. I pulled it out. The papers inside were messy, the edges crinkled, as if someone had pulled them out in a hurry, photographed them or read them, and shoved them back in without caring about the creases. Why? Why would my mother drive 2 hours to break into my bedroom and rifle through my insurance papers? I sat down at my computer. A terrible thought, cold and sharp, pierced through my denial. If she had been looking at my physical papers, what else had she looked at? I opened my email client. I went to the search bar. I typed in the name of my insurance provider, Harborstone. The search results populated. There were the usual monthly statements, payment received, payment received, payment received, but then I saw it, buried in the list, marked as read, but filed away in a folder named Archive, a folder I almost never used, was an email from 6 months ago. The subject line read, "Confirmation of profile update." I clicked it, my breath hitching in my throat. "Dear Lillian, this email is to confirm that the recovery email address and phone number associated with your account have been successfully updated. If you did not make this change, please contact us immediately." I stared at the date. 6 months ago, I had never seen this email. I had never authorized a change. I clicked on the account settings link. I tried to log in. My password worked, which was strange. If they had hacked me, why keep the password? Then I saw the recovery info. The recovery email was not mine. It was k.alston55email.com, Kirk, and the secondary phone number ended in 4492. My mother's cell phone. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning. They had not just decided to do this last week. This was not an impulsive act of greed. They had been planning this for half a year. They had hacked my account 6 months ago. They had changed the recovery information so that any alerts about future changes, like, say, a change of beneficiary, would go to them, not me. They had silenced the alarm system of my life long before they brought the matches. I looked at the date again. 6 months. That meant every time I talked to them on the phone for the last 6 months, every time I sent a birthday card, every time I thought we were just a distant but normal family, they were waiting. They were watching my premiums being paid. They were waiting for the value of my assets to hit a certain number. They were waiting for the right time to strike. And then, 5 days ago, Dana came to do the final walkthrough. The black bag. The gym bag. It wasn't a gym bag. It was a supply kit. Or maybe it was empty when she arrived, and she was looking for things to take? No. She left with it just as heavy as she came. Wait. The timer. I remembered the fire investigator mentioning a timer, a plug-in timer. I closed my eyes and pictured the living room again. I pictured Dana crouching by the outlet behind the TV. "Do these outlets spark?" she had asked. She had not been checking for safety. She had been checking for clearance. She had been checking if there was space to plug something in. Something that could be set to a specific time. Something that could spark a flame when she was miles away. Safe in her own bed. Leaving me to burn. The horror of it was not just the violence. It was the patience. Why change the beneficiary 1 week before the fire if they had access for 6 months? Because 6 months ago, I didn't have the new furniture. 6 months ago, I hadn't upgraded the policy limits. They waited until I had maximized the value of my own destruction. They let me fatten the pig before they slaughtered it. I looked at the dark apartment around me. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch out like grasping hands. I was not safe. I had never been safe. I reached for my phone to change my passwords, my fingers flying across the screen in a panic. Reset, reset, reset. But as the confirmation wheel spun, a cold realization settled over me. It didn't matter if I changed the locks now. The intruders had already been inside for a long, long time, and they had left something behind. I just didn't know what it was yet. But I knew one thing for certain. The fire was not an accident, and my mother's visit was not a reunion. It was a rehearsal. The office of Harborstone Renters Insurance was located on the 3rd floor of a glass building that looked far too clean for the dirty business of disaster. The waiting room smelled of industrial lemon cleaner and stale coffee. I sat in a chair that was upholstered in a scratchy blue fabric. Clutching my purse to my chest, my hands were still dry from the ash and the cold, and my cuticles were ragged. I looked like a woman who had just walked out of a burning building. Because I had been summoned here. The email had been vague, citing urgent discrepancies that required in-person verification. After the revelation about my mother's visit and the hacked email account, I walked into that building with a sense of dread that felt heavier than the fatigue in my bones. A receptionist with perfect teeth and a headset pointed me down a long corridor. "Mr. Haynes is in office 302, she said. Not looking up from her screen, I walked down the hall. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a low, buzzing sound that made my headache throb behind my eyes. I found the door and knocked. "Come in." Evan Haynes looked like a man who had been practicing his apology face in the mirror for half an hour. He was young, perhaps late 20s, with a tie that was knotted a little too tightly and a desk that was cluttered with manila folders. When I stepped inside, he did not smile. He stood up, gestured to the empty chair across from him, and looked at me with an expression that was 1 part pity and 2 parts fear. "Miss Marshall," he said, "thank you for coming in so quickly. I know this is a difficult time." "Mr. Haynes," I said, sitting down. I did not have the energy for small talk. "You said there was a discrepancy with my claim. My policy is paid up. I have never missed a premium in 5 years. What is the problem?" Evan sat down and folded his hands on the desk. He looked at his fingers, then at me. "The policy is active," he said slowly, "and the premiums are indeed current. The issue is not with the coverage itself. The issue is with the payout structure." He reached for a folder that was set apart from the others. It was thick. He opened it and slid a single sheet of paper across the smooth laminate surface of the desk. "This document," he said, "was processed and finalized exactly 1 week ago." I looked down. It was a standard Harborstone form. The header read, "Request for change of beneficiary/policy ownership adjustment." I scanned the lines. My name was printed at the top as the policyholder. My address at Riverview Lofts was correct. But as my eyes moved down to the section labeled Primary Beneficiaries, the room seemed to tilt on its axis. In the box where my estate or next of kin should have been listed, or simply left blank, as it had been when I first signed up, there were 2 names typed in bold. Capital letters, Dana Ralston, Kirk Ralston. Next to their names was the allocation percentage, 100%. I stared at the number. It was not a typo. It was spelled out and numerical. The entirety of the payout was directed to them. "This covers everything?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It does," Evan said. He sounded pained. "And I should inform you, Miss Marshall, that the coverage limits on your policy were significantly increased on the same day this form was filed. You, or the person claiming to be you, added the Platinum Replacement Rider. This covers high-value electronics, jewelry, and artwork without depreciation." He tapped a calculator on his desk. "With the structural liability and the expanded personal property coverage," Evan said, "the total claim value for the fire at your apartment is estimated to be $165,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. $165,000. That was why they did not care. That was why Kirk had said, "Not our problem," with such terrifying calm. It was not just that they did not want to help me. It was that helping me would have been a conflict of interest. They did not need me to survive and recover. They needed me to be a tragedy. They needed the total loss. "I did not sign this," I said. I looked up at Evan, my eyes burning. "I did not authorize this change. I did not increase my coverage limits. I did not assign my parents as beneficiaries." Evan sighed. He reached into the folder again and pulled out a magnified photocopy of the bottom of the form. "We expected you might say that," he said. "However, from a legal standpoint, the document is binding. Please look at the signature." I looked at the bottom of the page. There, in black ink, was my name, Lillian Marshall. It was sickening. It was my signature. It had the slight slant to the right that I had developed in college. It had the distinct loop on the capital M. It was identical to the signature on my driver's license. If I had been a juror looking at this, I would have sworn it was mine. "It is a forgery," I said, but my voice lacked the conviction of proof. "Someone copied it. They must have traced it from an old birthday card or a check." Evan shook his head slightly. "It is not just the signature, Miss Marshall. It is the method of submission." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Usually, these forms are mailed in or submitted through the secure online portal, but this form was not mailed. It was submitted in person." I froze. "What?" "7 days ago," Evan said. "At 2:15 in the afternoon. A woman came into this branch. She stood right there at the front counter." "A woman?" I repeated. "She identified herself as Lillian Marshall," Evan said. "The clerk who handled the transaction remembers it clearly because the customer was memorable." "Memorable how?" "She was in a rush," Evan said. "She was agitated. She told the clerk that she was going out of town for a major business trip and needed to get her affairs in order immediately. She said she was too busy to wait for the notary and caused quite a scene about bureaucratic red tape. She had all the correct information. She knew your social security number. She knew your mother's maiden name. She knew the exact date you opened the policy. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She had your identification, Evan added softly. My ID? I asked. That is impossible. My driver's license was in my wallet. I have it right here. She presented a Pennsylvania driver's license with the name Lillian Marshall. Evan said. The clerk checked it. The photo matched the woman standing at the counter. I sat back, my mind reeling. This was not just hacking. This was not just my mother sneaking into my apartment to case the joint. This was theater. Someone had walked into this office, wearing my face, or a version of it, and erased me. Was it my mother? I asked. Was it Dana Ralston? Evan hesitated. The clerk described a woman with dark hair, glasses, wearing a business suit. She looked mature for 32, perhaps, but the clerk assumed it was just stress or bad lighting. She had a scarf wrapped around her neck and chin. She claimed she had a dental procedure and was swollen. A scarf, a business suit, dark hair. My mother had dark hair. She wore business suits. And if she wore big glasses and a scarf, and if the clerk was tired and just wanted to get the yelling customer out of the lobby, it was her, I whispered. She pretended to be me. She came here, pretended to be a stressed-out version of me, and signed the rights to my life over to herself. If that is true, Evan said, then this is fraud, massive, federal-level insurance fraud, and identity theft. He paused, and then he dropped the piece of information that changed everything. You are not the first person to ask about this file today. Lillian. I looked at him sharply. Who else? A fire investigator, Evan said. Name of Grant Sloan. He called me 3 hours ago. He asked specifically if there had been any recent changes to the beneficiary status of your policy. When I told him about the change last week, he went very quiet. What did he say? He asked me to secure the original document, Evan said. He said that this piece of paper was likely the motive for a felony. Evan looked at me, and for the first time, the corporate mask slipped completely. He looked like a human being who was horrified by what he was seeing. Miss Marshall, he said, if your parents are the beneficiaries, and they are the ones who submitted this form, then you are in a very dangerous position. They stand to gain nearly $200,000 from your loss. And usually, in cases like this, the insurance company looks at the beneficiary first. But since they made it look like you made the change, they want it to look like I planned it, I realized aloud. They want it to look like I upped the insurance and then burned my own place down for the cash. Exactly, Evan said. If the fire is ruled arson, and the policy was changed by you a week prior, the investigation targets you. You go to prison for insurance fraud and arson. The claim is denied to you, but depending on how the legal battle goes, if they can prove they were innocent third parties, or if you are incapacitated. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I understood the game now. It was not just about the money, it was about the blame. They had set a trap where I would either die in the fire, leaving them the money, or I would survive and be framed for the crime, leaving them the money, or at least, leaving me with nothing but a prison sentence while they walked away clean. Can I have a copy of this? I asked, pointing to the forgery. I have already prepared one for you, Evan said. He slid a manila envelope across the desk. And I have already sent a digital copy to Investigator Sloan. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, but my mind was sharpening. The shock was burning off, replaced by a cold, hard anger. Thank you, Evan, I said. Be careful. Lillian, he said. These people, whoever did this, they are bold. To walk into an office and impersonate you? That takes a level of confidence that is not normal. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. I watched the numbers count down. 3, 2, 1. I walked out into the bright, harsh sunlight of the parking lot. I looked at the envelope in my hand. Inside was the proof that my parents had sold me out for $165,000. They had quantified my worth. They had decided that my life, my home, my safety, and my future were worth exactly that much. I got into my car, or rather, the rental car that the insurance company had provided before this meeting, and sat in the driver's seat. I gripped the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I thought about the memorable woman at the counter, the scarf, the fake dental surgery story to hide her jawline, the yelling to fluster the clerk. It was a performance. My mother was always good at performances. I had spent my whole life thinking my parents were just distant, cold, and self-absorbed. I thought they were just bad at being parents. I was wrong. They were not bad at being parents. They were excellent at being predators. I put the car in gear. I was not going back to Tessa's house to cry. I had a meeting with a fire investigator, and for the first time since the sparks began to fly, I had something to give him. I had the motive, and it was signed in my own name. The coffee shop Grant Sloan had chosen was a small, independent place on the south side of the city, far enough from the Riverview lofts that I would not run into neighbors, and far enough from my parents' house that I would not have to look over my shoulder. It was a neutral ground, a demilitarized zone. The air inside smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, a stark, nauseating contrast to the smell of wet ash that seemed to be permanently lodged in my sinuses. I sat in the back corner, my hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee that I had no intention of drinking. I was vibrating with the energy of the revelation I had just had at the insurance office. My parents had bet on my destruction. They had signed their names to it. Grant arrived precisely at 2 p.m. He did not look like a man stopping for a casual break. He carried a leather satchel and wore a jacket that looked like it had seen its fair share of soot stains. He ordered nothing. He simply slid into the booth across from me, placed his bag on the table, and looked at me with that same dissecting, intense gaze he had used at the insurance office. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "Lillian," he said quietly. "Worse," I said. "I saw a beneficiary form. You were right. They changed it. 100% to Dana and Kirk Ralston." Grant nodded. He did not look surprised. He looked grim. "I spoke to Evan Haynes," Grant said. "He told me about the woman at the counter, the scarf, the swelling. It is a classic move. Obscure the face, create a sense of urgency, and bully the low-level employee into bypassing the usual scrutiny. It is bold, but it is also reckless." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a tablet. He placed it on the table between us. "We need to talk about the fire. Lillian, I have the preliminary results from the lab." I braced myself. "Tell me." "I told you before that the burn patterns were suspicious," Grant began, tapping the screen to wake it up. "Now I can tell you why. In a standard electrical fire, say, a short circuit in an outlet, we look for something called beading. It is what happens when copper wire melts from internal heat. It creates these little round beads on the end of the wire. It is distinct." He swiped to a high-resolution photo. It was a close-up of a blackened, twisted piece of metal protruding from a melted plastic box. "This is the outlet behind your media console," he said. "The copper is not beaded. It is brittle and fractured. That means the heat attacked the wire from the outside in. The fire did not start in the wiring. It started at the wiring." He swiped to the next image. It showed the floor directly beneath the outlet. Even through the char, I could see a pattern. It looked like a V shape, radiating outward and upward. "This is a V pattern," Grant explained. "Fire moves up and out. The base of the V points to the origin. Your V is incredibly narrow at the base. That suggests a rapid ignition. If this had been a slow smolder, the base would be wider. This fire stood up and ran. It accelerated." "Accelerated how?" I asked. "I did not keep gas cans in my living room." "No," Grant said. "But we found chemical residue on the baseboard. The lab is still breaking it down. But the preliminary mass spectrometry suggests a paraffin-based compound, like a fire starter cube, or a heavy wax." Something that burns hot and steady for a few minutes to get the surrounding materials, the curtains, the drywall, up to their ignition temperature. I felt sick. I thought about my mother crouching down by that outlet. I thought about the gym bag she refused to put down. "She put something there," I whispered. "She put something behind the cabinet." "We found something else," Grant said. "Or rather, we found a piece of something, a fragment of a mechanical timer, the kind you plug into an outlet to turn a lamp on and off while you are on vacation." I nodded. "I know the kind, but I did not own one." "It was fused to the plastic of the outlet cover," Grant said. "The timer was set to allow current to flow at a specific time. If you plug a heating element or a modified ignition device into a timer, you can be miles away when the spark happens." "She was miles away," I said. "She was in her bed, sleeping, when she answered my call." "It is a simple, brutal mechanism," Grant said. "But mechanisms require access, and that brings me to the second part of what I found today." He closed the photo app and opened a spreadsheet. It was a log of data, rows and columns of timestamps and alphanumeric codes. "Your building, the Riverview Lofts, uses a cloud-based access control system," Grant said. "Every time a resident unlocks the front door or their unit door, it logs the time and the specific key fob ID. I subpoenaed the logs from the management company this morning." He pointed to a highlighted row. "This is the day of your mother's visit," he said. "Tuesday. The log shows your primary fob opening the door at 7:14 in the evening. That matches when you let her in." "Right," I said. "But look at this entry," he said, sliding his finger down to earlier in the day. I looked. The timestamp was 2 in the afternoon, 5 hours before she arrived at my door. "Entry denied," I read. "Invalid code." "Someone tried to get into the building's main entrance at 2 o'clock, Grant said. "They punched in a code that didn't work. Then, 30 seconds later, they punched in a different code, and the door opened." "I was at work," I said. "I was at my desk at Grayford." "I know," Grant said. "The code that opened the door wasn't yours. It was a guest code, a temporary access pin that residents can generate for dog walkers or delivery people." "I never use those," I said. "I don't have a dog. I have my packages delivered to the lockers." "This code was generated specifically for that day," Grant said. "It was active for 24 hours. And here's the kicker. Lillian, the system logs who created the code." He looked at me, his eyes full of a hard, sympathetic truth. "The code was created from the resident portal account associated with Lillian, Marshall Grayford. Email." I stared at him. "That is my email, but I did not do it." "The request to generate the code was sent from an IP address that does not match your work computer or your home Wi-Fi," Grant said. "It matches a mobile data network, but the login credentials, they were yours." I leaned back against the booth, the leather creaking. "My email. They have been in my email for 6 months. I saw the notification in the archive folder. They reset my password or added themselves as a recovery contact. They logged in as me, generated a guest code to get into the front door of the building, and sent it to themselves." "So when she arrived at 7, Grant said, "she didn't need you to let her into the main building. She probably used the code earlier to test it, or maybe your father used it." "Kirk," I said. "The log shows an attempt at 2 o'clock. Kirk could have been there, testing the perimeter, seeing if the code worked." "It means they had independent access," Grant said. "They did not just rely on you opening the door. They had a digital key that they created using your own identity. This is why the insurance fraud works so well. Lillian, everything points back to you. The beneficiary change, signed by you, the access code, created by you, the insurance increase, requested by you." I felt a wave of panic rising in my chest. It was suffocating. I felt like I was being buried alive under a mountain of digital evidence that I had never touched. "I have to tell the police," I said, my voice rising. "I have to call them now. I have to tell them it is a lie. I have to confront Dana. I want to drive to her house and scream in her face until she admits it." Grant reached across the table and put his hand over mine. His grip was firm, grounding. "No," he said sharply. "Lillian, listen to me. Do not do that." "Why not?" I demanded. "They are framing me." "Because right now, you are the hysterical victim," Grant said, his voice low and urgent. "Think about the narrative they are building. You just lost your home. You are traumatized. You are under immense stress. If you show up at their house screaming, or if you start calling the police with wild accusations without physical proof, you play exactly into the role they have cast for you." He leaned in closer. "They have already planted the seeds. Lillian, I spoke to the building manager. He mentioned that your mother called him yesterday, just to check on you. She told him she was worried about your mental state. She told him you had been acting erratic lately, paralyzed by financial stress." "That is a lie," I hissed. "I was fine. I was saving money." "It does not matter if it is a lie," Grant said. "It matters that she said it before the accusation came out. It is called preloading the witness. If you react explosively now, everyone, the police, the insurance company, the judge, will look at you and see exactly what your mother told them to see. A woman who snapped." I stared at my hands. They were shaking. He was right. It was diabolical. They weren't just stealing my money. They were stealing my credibility. They were stealing my voice. "So what do I do?" I asked, feeling a tear slide down my cheek. "Do I just let them get away with it?" "No," Grant said. "We get them, but we do it the right way. We do not fight them with emotion. We fight them with data. We need something they cannot explain away. We need something that puts them in the apartment or at the scene of the crime in a way that Lillian's mental state cannot account for. We have the guest code," I said. "It is strong, but they can argue you gave it to them," Grant countered. "They can say you invited them and then forgot because you are confused. We need more. We need to place them there when they said they were not there. We need to find the physical link between them and the fire." He pulled up one last photo. It was a grainy image from a street camera. Not the building's camera, but a traffic cam a block away. "I found this," Grant said. 2:15 in the afternoon on Tuesday, the same time the guest code was tested. In the corner of the frame, blurry but identifiable, was a silver sedan. "Is that Kirk's car?" Grant asked. I squinted. It was a silver Toyota Avalon. "It looks like it. He drives a silver Avalon." "I am running the plates now," Grant said. "If I can place his car in the city at 2 o'clock, when he claimed to be at work in the suburbs. We have a crack in their alibi, but we need more than a car. We need the device. We need the bag." "The black bag," I said. She never put it down. If she brought the timer and the accelerant in that bag, she had to take the rest of it out. She wouldn't leave the bottle of accelerant in the fire. She would take the evidence with her. "Exactly," Grant said. "And if she took it with her, she had to dispose of it, or hide it." He looked at me with a steely determination. "Lillian, the person who did this is arrogant. They used your own email. They walked into your insurance office wearing a disguise. Arrogant criminals make mistakes because they think they are smarter than everyone else. They think you are weak. They think you are going to fold." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on me. "They are trying to gaslight you into a prison cell," Grant said. "Do not let them see you sweat. Go to work. Stay at your friend's house. Act like you are confused and sad. Let them think their plan is working. Because the moment they think they have won, they will get sloppy." I took a deep breath. The smell of coffee suddenly felt grounding instead of nauseating. I looked at the photos of the burnt outlet. I looked at the log of the access code created by my own stolen identity. My parents wanted a tragedy. They wanted a broken daughter who would sign whatever papers they put in front of her just to make the pain go away. They had severely underestimated the compliance analyst in me. I spent my life finding errors in other people's work. I spent my life looking for the one thing that didn't fit. "Okay," I said. "I can do that. I can be quiet." "Good," Grant said, "because the next step is the hard part. We need to find out where that black bag went. and I have a feeling it never left the building." "What do you mean?" "The footage of her leaving," Grant said. "I reviewed the lobby tape again before I came here. When she left at 4:46, she was walking fast. She had her purse. But Lillian—" He trailed off, waiting for me to catch up. "The bag," I realized. "The gym bag." "She wasn't holding it," Grant said. "She walked in with a large black duffel bag. She walked out without it." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "She left it there?" I asked. "But the fire consumed everything. If she left the bag in the apartment, it would have burned." "Unless she didn't leave it in the apartment," Grant said. "Unless she stashed it somewhere else in the building on her way out. Somewhere she could come back to later, or somewhere she thought no one would look." "The storage lockers," I said. "The basement storage units. Every resident has one. I never use mine." "It is empty." Grant's eyes lit up. "Does the same fob open the storage area?" "Yes," I said. "Then we have a place to look," Grant said. "But we have to be fast, because if they realize they left a loose end, they will be coming back for it." I stood up. The fear was still there, buzzing in my veins, but it was being overtaken by a cold, sharp clarity. "I will not confront them," I said to Grant. "I will let them think I am losing my mind, but I'm going to find that bag." "We will find it," Grant corrected. "Together." I walked out of the coffee shop into the gray afternoon light. I checked my phone. There was a text message from my mother. "Thinking of you. Honey, hope you are resting. We are so worried about you." I stared at the screen. A week ago, I would have read that as love. Now, I read it as a probe. She was checking to see if the victim was still playing her part. I typed back, my fingers steady. "I am okay. Mom, just very confused and tired. I miss you." I hit send. It was the first lie I had ever told her that felt like the truth. I did miss her. I missed the mother I thought I had. But that woman was dead. She had died in the fire with my apartment. The woman on the other end of the phone was a stranger who wanted to put me in a cage, and I was about to show her that she had taught me how to survive much better than she realized. The next morning, the assault shifted fronts. It moved from the physical wreckage of my apartment to the structural integrity of my mind. I woke up on Tessa's sofa at 7 a.m. The sun was streaming in through the blinds, casting stripes of light across the unfamiliar room. For a split second, I forgot where I was. Then the smell of the borrowed laundry detergent on the pillowcase hit me, and the reality crashed back down. I reached for my phone, expecting maybe a follow-up from Grant or a generic notification from the insurance company. Instead, the screen was lit up with a missed call and a voicemail from my Aunt Caroline. Caroline was my mother's younger sister. She was a woman who weaponized concern. She did not gossip. She shared burdens. She did not judge. She prayed for clarity. I pressed play on the voicemail, my stomach tightening. "Lillian, honey." Caroline's voice oozed through the speaker, thick with a performative sweetness that made my skin crawl. "It is Aunt Caroline. Your mother called me last night. She is just beside herself. Sweetheart, she told us about the confusion, about how you are struggling to separate reality from the stress right now. I just want you to know we are all praying for you. Do not worry about the money or the things you lost. Just focus on getting your mind right. We know you did not mean to cause any trouble. Call me when you are lucid." Lucid. The word hung in the air like a slap. I sat up, gripping the phone. Lucid? My mother had told her sister, and by extension, the entire family network, that I was having a mental break. She had planted the narrative that I was confused, that I was detaching from reality. Before I could process the voicemail, a text message pinged from my cousin Sarah. "Thinking of you. Lil, Mom said you are having a hard time remembering things. Take a break. Don't stress about the accident. We love you." And another from my uncle. "Rest up. The mind is a fragile thing. Don't let the guilt eat you up. Accidents happen." I stared at the screen, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. This was orchestrated. In the 12 hours since I had left the insurance office, My parents had launched a preemptive strike on my credibility. They were not just claiming the fire was an accident, they were implying that I had caused it, perhaps in a fugue state, and that my accusations against them were nothing more than the ravings of a traumatized daughter. "They are painting me as crazy," I whispered to the empty room. "They are telling everyone I am unstable." It was brilliant. It was evil. But it was brilliant. If I went to the police now and said my mother stole my identity, the family would step forward as character witnesses. They would say, "Oh, poor Lillian. She has been spiraling. She barely knows what day it is." I needed coffee. I needed to think. I walked into Tessa's kitchen, my legs feeling heavy. Tessa was already gone for work, having left a note and a spare key on the counter. I opened my laptop to check my work email. I needed normalcy. I needed to look at spreadsheets and compliance reports. I needed to remind myself that I was a competent, high-functioning professional, not the fragile, broken doll my family was describing. I logged into the Grayford Compliance Partner server. The first email in my inbox was not from a client. It was not a daily briefing. It was from the Director of Human Resources. The subject line read, "Confidential. Fitness for duty. Evaluation/leave of absence inquiry." My hands hovered over the keyboard. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I clicked the email. "Dear Ms. Marshall, we have received a formal anonymous concern regarding your current well-being and fitness to perform your duties as a senior compliance analyst. The report suggests that recent personal traumas may be impacting your judgment and stability. Given the sensitive nature of your role and your access to confidential client data, we are required to take these reports seriously. Effective immediately, your access to client files has been temporarily suspended pending a fitness for duty review. We have also received a request filed under your employee ID for emergency mental health leave. Please contact us by 2 in the afternoon today to discuss the next steps." I read the paragraph 3 times. A request filed under your employee ID for emergency mental health leave. I had not filed a request. I had not asked for leave. I had planned to work remotely today to keep my mind occupied. I navigated frantically to the internal HR portal. I went to the Requests tab. There it was. Submitted yesterday at 4:30 in the afternoon. Request for emergency medical leave/FMLA. I opened the document. As I read the justification section, my blood ran cold. The words were written in the first person. They were written as me. I, Lillian Marshall, am requesting immediate leave due to an acute stress reaction and a recurrence of adolescent anxiety symptoms. I am currently unable to focus on detailed tasks and fear I may compromise client security due to cognitive fatigue following a personal tragedy. It was written in my professional voice. It used the correct corporate terminology. It sounded exactly like me, if I were admitting defeat. But the detail that made me want to vomit was the phrase recurrence of adolescent anxiety symptoms. I did not have adolescent anxiety, but when I was 14, I had seen a counselor for 2 months after my biological father died. It was a private, painful time that I never spoke about. The only people who knew about those sessions were me and my mother. She had used my teenage grief as a weapon to destroy my adult career. Tessa walked through the front door then, having forgotten her lunch. She stopped when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, pale and trembling. "Lillian," she said, dropping her bag. "What happened? Did the police call?" "No," I said, my voice sounding hollow. "My mother called HR." I turned the laptop around so she could see. Tessa read the email, then the fake request. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Lillian, this isn't just about the insurance money anymore." "I know," I said. "This is a demolition," Tessa said, her voice rising in anger. "If you get flagged for mental instability in our industry, you are done. No one will trust you with compliance data. You will lose your clearance. You will lose your license." She looked at me, grabbing my shoulders. "They are trying to get you fired. Why? Why would they do that?" "Because if I have no job," I said, realizing the endgame. "I have no income. If I have no income and no apartment, I am destitute. And if I am destitute and mentally unstable, who becomes my legal guardian? Who takes control of my assets and my decisions? They do, Tessa said. They are trying to force you into a conservatorship, or at least make you so dependent on them that you have to crawl back home. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from pure, unadulterated rage. They wanted to strip me of everything: my home, my money, my reputation, my autonomy. They wanted to turn me into a child again, a helpless little girl they could control and profit from. My phone buzzed. It was Grant Sloan. I picked it up. "Grant. Lillian," he said. "I am heading to the station to file the request for the street cam footage of the silver car. How are you holding up?" "They got to my job," I said. "Someone used my login to file a mental health leave request. They told HR I am having a breakdown. My aunt called and said the whole family thinks I am hallucinating." Grant was silent for a moment on the other end of the line. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have warned you. This is the pivot." "The pivot?" "It is a standard arsonist tactic, specifically in family fraud cases." Grant explained, his voice clinical but kind. "If they can't hide the fire, they have to discredit the witness. They need you to look like the one who started it. If you are unstable, then the fire was just a tragic accident caused by a confused woman, or a cry for help. It exonerates them from the setup. It makes them look like the suffering parents dealing with a troubled child." "They used my private medical history," I said. "They used things only a mother would know to make the lie sound real." "That is what makes it effective," Grant said. "The best lies are wrapped in a skin of truth. But Lillian, listen to me. This confirms everything." "How?" "Innocent parents do not hack their daughter's work portal to file fake resignation letters," Grant said. "Innocent parents do not start a whisper campaign about mental health 24 hours after a fire. They are scrambling. They are trying to bury you before we can dig up the truth." "It feels like it is working," I said. "HR wants to talk to me in 2 hours. "Then you talk to them," Grant said firmly. "But you do not scream. You do not cry. You do not tell them about the conspiracy or the murder plot. You walk in, or you get on that Zoom call, and you be the most boring, rational, calm person they have ever seen." "They won't believe me," I said. "The request is in the system." "You tell them it was a hacking incident," Grant said. "You tell them you have engaged a forensic specialist because your personal data was compromised. You keep it professional. You deny the request calmly. You ask for the IP address log of that submission." He paused. "Lillian, if you crack now, they win. If you scream, you prove them right. You have to do the hardest thing in the world. You have to be stone cold while your world is burning." I looked at Tessa. She nodded, her expression fierce. "I can help you," Tessa said. "We can draft the response together. We will pull the logs. We will show them that the request came from outside the network." I took a deep breath. I wiped the single tear from my face. My mother wanted a reaction. She wanted the hysterical Lillian. She wanted the daughter who would call crying, begging for forgiveness, begging to come home so she could take care of me. She wanted a victim. I looked at the fake letter on the screen. "I am currently unable to focus." I closed the tab. I opened a new email draft addressed to the HR director. "No," I said to Grant. "I am not going to crack." I started typing. My fingers were steady. The words came out precise, sharp, and devoid of any emotion. I requested the IT logs. I formally disputed the submission. I stated for the record that my account had been accessed by an unauthorized third party and that I was filing a police report regarding identity theft. I did not mention my mother. I did not mention the betrayal. I treated it like a compliance error. I treated it like a puzzle to be solved. "I am going to play their game," I told Grant. "I will let them think I am silent because I am broken. I will let the family think I am resting. I will let them feel safe." "That is dangerous," Grant warned. "It is necessary," I said. They think they are hunting a wounded animal. They do not realize they just walked into a trap. I hung up the phone. I looked at Tessa. "Do you have a suit I can borrow?" I asked. "I have a video call with HR at 2, and I need to look like I'm ready to run a Fortune 500 company." Tessa smiled. A grim, shark-like smile. "I have a navy blazer that says, 'Do not mess with me' in 3 languages." I stood up. The fear was gone. In its place was something much colder. Something hard and heavy like a stone in my chest. My parents had burned my home. They had stolen my money. Now they were trying to steal my mind. If they wanted to tell the world I was crazy, fine. I would not argue. I would not shout. I would be so quiet, so collected, so terrifyingly reasonable that when the handcuffs finally clicked around their wrists, they wouldn't even hear them coming. "Let's get to work," I said. The building management office smelled of floor wax and stale air conditioning. It was a windowless box on the ground floor, tucked behind the mailroom, filled with filing cabinets and a bank of monitors that hummed with a low, electric buzz. Grant Sloan and I sat on folding chairs behind Nate Holbrook, the property manager. Nate was a nervous man in his 40s who treated every request like it was a personal audit. He was typing on his keyboard with 2 fingers, his eyes darting between us and the screen. "I am not supposed to show residents the raw footage," Nate said, his voice whiny. "It is a violation of privacy policy if corporate finds out." "Nate," Grant said, his voice low and hard. "We are investigating a felony arson. The police are going to have a warrant here in about an hour. I am giving you a chance to be the guy who helped solve the case. Rather than the guy who obstructed a federal fire investigation, do you want your name in the report as a witness or a suspect?" Nate swallowed hard. He hit the enter key. "The system is new," Nate mumbled. "We just upgraded to high-definition IP cameras 3 months ago. Cloud storage. It captures everything." "Pull up Tuesday," Grant ordered. "Start at 1 in the afternoon. Camera 4, the main lobby elevator bank." The screen flickered, and then a crisp, digital image appeared. It was the lobby of my building. It looked sterile and bright. People walked in and out. A delivery guy with a stack of boxes. A woman walking a golden retriever. Then, the timestamp in the corner rolled to 14 minutes past 1 in the afternoon. My breath hitched in my throat. The elevator doors slid open. A woman stepped out. It was Dana. Seeing her on the screen was visceral. It was different from remembering her visit. In my memory, she was my mother. Awkward, annoying, but familiar, on the screen, stripped of my emotional filter. She looked like a predator. She was wearing the trench coat I remembered, but she had the collar popped up high. She was wearing sunglasses, even though she was inside, and in her right hand, she was dragging the bag, the black canvas duffel bag. "Pause," Grant said. Nate froze the image. "Look at the strap," Grant said, pointing to the screen. "Look at the tension in her shoulder." He was right. The strap was digging into her shoulder. Her arm was taut. The bag was heavy. It was not full of clothes or gym gear. It hung low to the ground, pulling her slightly to the right. "That bag weighs at least 30 pounds, Grant estimated. "Maybe 40? "Play," Grant said. We watched Dana walk to the keypad. She didn't hesitate. She didn't call me. She punched in a code, the guest code she had generated from my stolen account, and the inner door clicked open. She walked to the elevators. She waited. When the car arrived, she stepped inside and pressed the button for the 4th floor. "Switch to the 4th floor hallway," Grant commanded. Nate clicked a few keys. The view changed. We were looking down the long, carpeted corridor leading to my apartment. The elevator opened. Dana stepped out, but she didn't go straight to my door. She stopped. She stood perfectly still in the middle of the hallway for 10 seconds. Looking left, then right, she was checking for neighbors. She was listening. "She is clearing the floor," Grant whispered. "She is making sure no one sees her enter." Satisfied that the hall was empty, she walked to my door, number 404. She pulled a key from her pocket. the spare key I had given her 5 years ago, for emergencies, and unlocked the door. She dragged the heavy bag inside. The door closed. The timestamp read 1:17 in the afternoon. "Fast forward," Grant said. "She told you she was there for 10 minutes? "She said she just popped in," I said, my stomach churning. "She said she was in the neighborhood." Nate held down the fast-forward key. The timestamp blurred. 2 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30. "Stop," Grant said. The time was now 4:46 in the afternoon, 3.5 hours. She had been inside my apartment for 3.5 hours. "What was she doing?" I whispered, horror washing over me. "I was at work. My apartment is 800 square feet. You can walk through it in 30 seconds. What was she doing for 3 hours?" "She was staging," Grant said grimly. "She was setting the scene." On the screen, my apartment door opened. Dana stepped out, and the room went silent. She was not wearing the trench coat anymore. She was carrying it folded over her arm. She looked flushed, her hair slightly messy. But that was not what stopped my heart. "Her hands," I said. "Look at her hands." She was holding her purse. She was holding her coat. But her hands were empty. The black bag was gone. "Where is the bag?" Nate asked, squinting at the monitor. "Did she leave it inside?" "No," I said instantly. "It wasn't there when I got home at 7. The apartment was tidy. There was no bag." "Are you sure?" Grant asked. "Could she have shoved it under the bed? In a closet?" "I keep a minimalist home, Grant," I said. "I would have noticed a massive black duffel bag in the middle of the room. And if she hid it deep in a closet, why? Why bring a gym bag? Stay for 3 hours, hide it, and then leave?" "Unless she didn't hide it in the apartment," Grant said. His eyes were narrowed, focused intensely on the screen. "Nate, show me the other exits. Did she leave via the stairwell?" "Checking," Nate said. We spent the next 20 minutes scrubbing through footage from every angle of the building. We checked the fire stairs. We checked the garage elevator. We checked the side exit that leads to the alley. Dana did not appear on any of them with the bag. She left the building through the main lobby at 4:50, empty-handed, walking briskly to her car. The silver Toyota Avalon parked down the street. "It is impossible," Nate said, scratching his head. "Matter doesn't just disappear. If she went in with a 40-pound bag and came out without it, the bag has to be in the building. Or she moved it to a different location within the building," Grant said. "Nate, does this building have storage units?" "Yeah," Nate said. "In the basement level, every unit is assigned a wire cage." "Does the resident key fob work for the basement?" Grant asked. "Yes." "Check the basement camera," Grant said. Between 1:17 and 4:46, Nate sighed and clicked on a new folder labeled Level B, Storage/Utility. The screen showed a dimly lit concrete corridor lined with metal cages. It was gray and shadowy. "Fast forward," Grant said. The timestamp spun. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. At 2:34 in the afternoon, the heavy fire door at the end of the hall opened. Dana walked in. She was not wearing her coat. She was in her shirt sleeves, and she was dragging the black bag. "Gotcha," Grant whispered. We watched as she walked down the row of cages. She stopped at Unit 44, my unit. She pulled out a padlock I had never bought, and unlocked the cage. She shoved the black bag inside, behind a stack of old cardboard boxes I had left there years ago. Then she closed the cage, locked it, and walked back to the elevator. "She stashed it," I said. She brought the supplies up to the apartment, took out what she needed, the timer, the accelerant, and then took the empty bag and the rest of the evidence down to the basement so it wouldn't be found in the fire. "Smart," Grant said. "If the fire investigators did a sweep, they would look in the apartment. They wouldn't necessarily check a basement storage unit 4 floors down, especially if the fire didn't reach the basement." "So it is still there," I said, starting to stand up. "Grant, we have to go down there. If the bag is there, we have the proof. We have her fingerprints. We might even have leftover accelerant." Grant didn't stand up. He was still staring at the screen. He looked troubled. "Wait," he said. "Nate, keep playing the basement footage. Go to the end of the day." "Why?" I asked. "We saw her put it in." "I want to know if she came back for it," Grant said. "Or if someone else did." Nate sped up the footage. The shadows in the basement lengthened as the afternoon wore on. Residents came and went. A guy grabbing a bike, a woman storing holiday decorations. Then, at 4:15, 30 minutes before Dana left the building upstairs, the service door at the far end of the hallway opened. It wasn't a resident. It was a man wearing a gray jumpsuit and a cap pulled low. He wasn't looking at the camera. He walked straight to my storage unit. He didn't fumble with keys. He had a pair of bolt cutters. Snap. He cut the lock Dana had just put on. He opened the cage, grabbed the black bag, and threw it over his shoulder. He turned and walked out the service door. The whole thing took 45 seconds. "Who is that?" I asked. "I don't know him." "Nate," Grant barked. "Service door exterior camera. Now." Nate scrambled. He pulled up the camera that covered the loading dock in the alley. At 4:14, a white box truck backed into the loading bay. It was dirty, nondescript. On the side, there was a magnetic decal that read, "City Waste Solutions." "We don't have a contract with City Waste," Nate said, frowning. "We use Republic Services. And trash pickup is on Thursdays." This was Tuesday. The man in the gray jumpsuit walked out of the service door carrying the black bag. He tossed it into the back of the truck. He didn't crush it like trash. He placed it carefully. Then he hopped into the passenger seat. The truck drove away at 4:20. "It was a handoff," Grant said. The realization made his voice heavy. "She didn't just hide it. She had a team, or at least a partner." "Kirk?" I asked. "The driver never got out," Grant said. "But the timing, it is surgical. She drops the bag in the basement. 40 minutes later, a trash truck that isn't a trash truck arrives, cuts the lock, and removes the evidence. By the time the fire starts 12 hours later, the bag is in a landfill or a shredder 3 counties away." I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just my parents. They hired people. A fake truck? A guy with bolt cutters? That costs money. That takes planning. "For a $165,000 payout?" Grant said. "People have killed for a lot less, and if they split the money with a cleaner crew, it is still a massive profit." He turned to me. "Lillian, they wiped the scene. The bag is gone. The bottles are gone. The clothes she wore to set the fire are gone." "So we have nothing?" I asked, despair crashing over me. "We have video of her with a bag, but we don't know what was in it. They will say it was laundry. They will say she was storing winter clothes for me." "We have suspicious behavior," Grant said. "But you are right. A defense attorney could argue that she was just moving your stuff. They could argue the theft was a coincidence, that a thief broke in and stole the bag." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I was too busy watching the ghost truck drive away with the only physical link to my mother's crime. "Answer it," Grant said. "It might be important." I pulled the phone out. It was a text from an unknown number, but the preview showed a file attachment. It was an image. I opened it. It was a photo of a plastic baggie with an evidence tag on it. Inside the baggie was a melted, blackened lump of plastic and metal. Below the photo was a text. "Lab results just came back. Mass spec confirms the polymer composition. It is a GE heavy-duty indoor mechanical timer." And Lillian? The timer mechanism was fused in the on position. The gear teeth are melted into the time slot for 2:55 a.m. I looked up at Grant. I showed him the phone. "The fire alarm went off at 2:58, I said. "The timer was set for 2:55. Grant looked at the photo, and a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. "They got rid of the bag," he said softly. "They got rid of the bottles. They got rid of the clothes." He tapped the screen of my phone. "But she forgot the one thing she couldn't take with her. She couldn't take the ignition switch because it was plugged into the wall, melting into the outlet while she was miles away. Is it enough? I asked. It proves an incendiary device was used, Grant said. It proves arson, and we have video of your mother spending 3 hours in the apartment, messing with the electrical layout, on the exact day the device was planted. He stood up, grabbing his jacket. We don't need the bag anymore. Lillian, the bag was the packaging, the timer is the weapon, and we just found the fingerprint on the trigger. I looked at the screen one last time, at the image of my mother walking away from my home, empty-handed, thinking she had committed the perfect crime. She missed a spot, I said. Let's go, Grant said. We have a lawyer to meet. It is time to stop playing defense. Marla Kincaid did not have an office that whispered of comfort. It screamed of war. Her desk was a slab of polished concrete. Her chair was stiff black leather, and her view of the Pittsburgh skyline looked like it was designed to judge the city rather than admire it. She was a woman who specialized in insurance fraud, specifically the kind where families decided that blood was thinner than a payout check. I sat across from her, watching her examine the change of beneficiary form under a lighted magnifying loupe. Marla did not look like a lawyer who held hands. She looked like a surgeon who enjoyed the cutting part a little too much. Interesting, she said, her voice raspy, like she had spent the last 20 years arguing over smoke damage and liability clauses. Is it a match? I asked. My hands were folded tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Oh, it is a match, Marla said, sitting back and tossing the loupe onto the desk. To the naked eye, it is your signature. To a bank teller, it is your signature. But to a forensic document examiner, or to me, it is a drawing. She turned the paper around so I could see it. She tapped a long, manicured fingernail on the curve of the S in Marshall. See that? She asked. That is called a hesitation mark. When you sign your name, Lillian, you do it with muscle memory. It is a ballistic movement. Your hand knows the path, and it flies. You do not think about the loop. You just do it. The ink flows smoothly because the pen never stops moving. She tapped the paper again, harder this time. This person stopped, right here at the top of the loop, and again at the cross of the T. They were looking at a reference copy, probably your driver's license or an old birthday card, and they were drawing the line to match it. They hesitated to check their work. The pen rested on the paper for a fraction of a second too long, and the ink bled slightly into the fibers. It is microscopic, but it is there. This is the signature of someone who practiced, not someone who lived. My mother, I said. She has my old report cards. She has checks I wrote her for rent when I was 22. It fits, Marla said. But proving a forgery in court is hard. It becomes a battle of experts. We need more than ink blots. We need a witness who saw the pen in the hand. She opened a folder on her laptop. I took the liberty of contacting the branch manager at Harborstone. Marla said, I have a reputation for being persistent. I got the shift log for the day the form was submitted. The clerk who processed this, a young man named Kevin, remembers the transaction vividly. Evan told me the woman caused a scene, I said. She did, Marla confirmed. But Kevin remembered something else. Something she said while she was shouting about the notary requirement. She slipped up. In the middle of her tirade about being in a rush for a business trip, she told him, I am just trying to handle this paperwork to help my daughter. I froze. She said that? She was pretending to be you, Marla said, but in the heat of the moment, her subconscious leaked out. She referred to herself in the third person. Or rather, she referred to the victim as her daughter. Kevin thought it was weird at the time. Why would you help your daughter by signing your own name as yourself? But he let it go because he wanted her out of his face. Marla spun the laptop around. There were 6 photographs on the screen. It was a standard photo lineup. We showed this to Kevin this morning, Marla said. Photo number 3. I looked at photo number 3. It was Dana Ralston. It was a picture from her work website, where she looked professional and capable. He picked her out in 4 seconds, Marla said. He said, that is the woman. She had a scarf on, but those are her eyes. That is the woman who yelled at me. So we have her, I said, feeling a surge of vindication. We have the forgery. We have the witness. We have the fraud, Marla corrected. But fraud is white collar. Fraud gets you probation and a fine. You want them for arson. You want them for attempted murder. For that. We need to connect the paper to the fire. The door to Marla's office opened, and Grant Sloan walked in. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright with the kind of energy that comes from finding the final piece of a puzzle. He didn't sit down. He walked straight to the wall where Marla had a whiteboard and taped up a receipt. I found the timer, Grant said without preamble. The GE mechanical timer? Marla asked, swiveling her chair. The exact model, Grant said. I tracked the batch number from the melted fragment we found in the photo. It is a common item, sold at thousands of hardware stores. But this specific batch was shipped to a distributor in western Pennsylvania 3 weeks ago. He tapped the receipt. I cross-referenced the inventory sales of every hardware store within a 10-mile radius of your parents' house. Lillian, most stores hadn't sold any. One store, Miller's Hardware, sold 1 unit exactly 6 days before the fire. Miller's Hardware, I said. That is on Route 19. It is 4 miles from their driveway. The purchase was made in cash, Grant said. Smart, no credit card trail, no digital footprint, just $5.99 in bills. So it is a dead end, I said, my heart sinking. Anyone could have bought it. Cash is anonymous, Grant agreed. But retail stores are not. I went to Miller's this morning. The owner is a guy who hates shoplifters, so he has 4K cameras covering every square inch of his counters. Grant pulled out his phone and cast a video to the large monitor on Marla's wall. The footage was grainy but clear enough. It showed the checkout counter of a small, cluttered hardware store. The timestamp was 11 in the morning on the Sunday before the fire. A man walked up to the counter. He was wearing a baseball cap and a windbreaker. He placed a small plastic package on the counter, the timer. He dug into his wallet and pulled out a bill. It was Kirk. There was no mistaking his posture, the way he stood with his weight on one leg, the way he didn't look at the cashier, just stared at the lottery tickets under the glass. He bought it, I whispered. Kirk bought the timer. He knew. He wasn't just following orders. He was the supply chain. Keep watching, Grant said. Look at his left hand. I looked. Kirk was leaning against the counter, in his left hand, resting against his leg. He was holding something. It was a black canvas bag. The same bag. The bag Dana had dragged into my apartment. The bag she had hidden in the basement. The bag the fake trash collector had taken away. He had the bag, I said, my voice rising. He bought the timer, put it in the bag, and then gave the bag to Dana. This ties them together, Marla said, her voice sharp with satisfaction. It is conspiracy. It is premeditation. Kirk buys the device. Dana plants the device. They both profit from the policy. It is a closed loop. We have enough to arrest them, I said. Grant, call the detective. Let's end this. Marla held up a hand. Not yet. Why not? I demanded. We have the signature, the witness, the video, the timer. What more do we need? We need to control the narrative, Marla said. Right now, you are the crazy daughter. The police have heard the rumors. The insurance company has the report from HR saying you are unstable. If we go to the police now, your parents will lawyer up. They will say Kirk bought a timer for his Christmas lights. They will say the bag is just a bag. They will say Dana was at the insurance office to pay your bill, not change it, and the clerk is mistaken. They can't explain away the signature, I said. They can try, Marla said. They will drag this out for 2 years. They will bleed you dry in legal fees while they sit in their house and play the victims. You don't just want an arrest. Lillian, you want a confession. Or at least, you want to catch them in a lie so big that no lawyer can spin it. So what do we do? I asked. Marla leaned forward. We wait for them to make the move they have been planning all week, the victory lap. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from my mother. Lillian, Please come home tonight. We are having a small family gathering. Just close family. We want to help you. We have some papers we can look over together to help you manage things. Please, for us." I read the text out loud. "A family gathering," Grant said, his jaw tightening, "to help you manage things." "It is an intervention," Marla said. "It is a trap. They have invited the aunt, the uncle, maybe even a family friend or a pastor. They are going to sit you down in a circle. They are going to tell you how worried they are. They are going to say you are not yourself. And then," Grant added, "they are going to produce a document, a power of attorney, or a voluntary commitment form." "Exactly," Marla said. "They want witnesses. They want 5 or 6 credible people to see you acting irrational, so that when the arson investigation gets hot, they can point to tonight and say, 'Look, even the family knows she is unwell. They are building their alibi on your back.' So I don't go," I said. "I stay here." "No," Marla said. A cold, dangerous smile spread across her face. "You go. You want me to walk into a trap?" "I want you to walk in there and spring it," Marla said. "They are expecting a broken girl. They are expecting you to cry, to yell, to deny it. They are expecting the Lillian they created." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "If you don't go, they control the story," she said. "They tell the family you refused help. They tell the police you are hiding. But if you go and you are calm and you confront them with the truth in front of the very audience they assembled, I blow the roof off," I realized. "They want a show," Marla said, turning back to me. "Give them a show, but you don't go alone. Grant will be right outside. I will have the police on standby. You walk in there, you let them make their speech, and then you drop the hammer." I looked at the photo of Kirk buying the timer. I looked at the photo of Dana's forged signature. These were not parents. They were architects of my ruin. I picked up my phone. I typed a reply to my mother. "I will be there at 7. "Are you ready for this?" Grant asked softly. "It is going to be ugly, to see them lie to your face in front of everyone." "I have been watching them lie to me for my whole life," I said. "I just didn't know the language they were speaking. Now I do." I stood up and smoothed my blazer. I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone. There was only the cold, hard weight of the evidence in my pocket. "I am not going there to argue with them," I said to Marla. "I am going there to introduce them to the consequences." "Good," Marla said. "Wear a wire, or in this case, just keep your phone recording in your pocket. Pennsylvania is a 2-party consent state, but there is an exception when you are recording evidence of a felony in progress, and what they are doing to you that is a crime in progress. I will record it all," I promised. I walked out of the office. The sun was setting over Pittsburgh, casting long shadows across the street. I was going home, not to the home that burned, but to the house where I grew up. The house where I learned to walk, learned to read, and apparently, where I was learned to be worth more dead than alive. They wanted a family meeting. I was going to give them one they would never forget. The driveway of my childhood home was lined with perfectly trimmed hedges. The porch light was on, casting a warm, welcoming yellow glow against the white siding. To a stranger driving past, it looked like the setting for a wholesome family dinner. To me, sitting in my rental car with the engine off, it looked like a film set. I checked my pocket. The phone was recording. I checked my other pocket. The tablet containing the video files was there. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of the new car upholstery, and told myself one thing: do not blink. I opened the car door and walked up the path. Before I could even ring the bell, the door swung open. My mother, Dana, stood there. She was wearing a soft, cream-colored cardigan and slacks. Her hair was perfectly coiffed. Her face was arranged into an expression of agonizing maternal concern. "Lillian," she breathed out, reaching for me. She pulled me into a hug. Her perfume, a heavy floral scent I had known my entire life, filled my nose. It made me want to gag. I felt her arms tighten around me. A squeeze that was meant to signal love, but felt entirely like containment. She was checking for tension. She was checking to see if I was shaking. I let my body go limp. I let her think I was the exhausted, broken thing she wanted me to be. "I am so glad you came," she whispered in my ear. "We have been so worried." She guided me into the living room. The space had been rearranged. Usually, the furniture was pointed toward the television. Tonight, the armchairs and the sofa were arranged in a circle. In the center, on the coffee table, was a spread of comfort food, finger sandwiches, cookies, a pot of tea, and then there was the audience. My Aunt Caroline was sitting on the edge of the sofa, clutching a tissue. My Uncle Bob was next to her, looking uncomfortable and staring at his shoes. My cousin Sarah was there, looking at me with wide, pitying eyes. It was not a dinner party, it was an ambush. Kirk was standing in the corner, near the fireplace. He was not sitting, he was pacing slightly, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. When I walked in, he stopped. He did not smile. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and aggression, like a dog that isn't sure whether to bite or run. "Come, sit down, honey," Dana said, guiding me to the empty armchair in the center of the circle. It was the seat of judgment. I sat. I placed my purse on the floor. I folded my hands in my lap. "We invited everyone here because we love you," Dana began. Taking her seat opposite me, she leaned forward, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "We know how hard this week has been for you, the fire, the trauma. It is too much for anyone to handle alone. It has been difficult," I said softly. My voice was steady, but I kept it low. Aunt Caroline chimed in, her voice trembling. "Lillian, your mother told us about the confusion, about how you have been struggling to remember things. We just want you to know that there is no shame in asking for help." "Confusion?" I asked, looking at Caroline. "The accident," Uncle Bob grunted, finally looking up. "Dana said you left the stove on, that you've been having these episodes, spacing out." I looked at Dana. She didn't flinch. She nodded famously, a sad, resigned nod. "I talked to a specialist," Dana said to the room, though her eyes were locked on mine. "Trauma can cause dissociation. It can make you do things you don't remember. It can make you paranoid. It can make you imagine enemies where there are only people who love you." She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a manila folder. "We want to protect you, Lillian," she said. "Kirk and I are willing to step in. We are willing to take on the burden of the insurance, the investigation, the rebuilding. You need to go to a facility. Just for a few weeks. Just to rest." She slid the folder across the table toward me. A pen was clipped to the top. "These are just some standard forms," Dana said. "They give us temporary power of attorney. It allows us to handle the insurance company so they stop harassing you. It allows us to access your accounts to pay your bills while you are in treatment. It is just until you are back on your feet." I looked at the papers. Power of attorney. Voluntary commitment. It was the final nail. If I signed this, I was admitting I was incompetent. If I signed this, the insurance investigation would turn into a tragic story about a mentally ill daughter who burned down her own apartment, and her heroic parents who stepped in to clean up the mess. They would get the money. I would get a padded room. I reached out and picked up the pen. I saw Kirk's shoulders relax. I saw a flash of triumph in Dana's eyes, quickly hidden behind the mask of concern. "You want to handle the insurance?" I asked. "We just want to help," Dana said. "You are clearly not in a state to deal with complex financial matters." I held the pen, rolling it between my fingers. "It is funny you mention the insurance," I said, "because the adjuster told me the policy had already been changed. He said the beneficiary was updated last week." The room went very quiet. Aunt Caroline stopped sniffing. "That must be a mistake," Dana said, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Or maybe you did it and forgot. That is what we mean about the confusion." "Honey, maybe," I said. I put the pen down. I did not sign. "I have been thinking about that day," I continued, my voice gaining a little more strength. "The day you visited, Tuesday. What about it? Kirk snapped from the corner. What does that have to do with anything? I'm just trying to remember, I said, looking at my mother. My memory is so bad. Apparently, Mom, how long were you at my apartment that day? Dana blinked. She looked at the relatives, performing incredulity. I don't know. A little while. 20 minutes? I just dropped by to say hello and use the restroom. Why? 20 minutes, I repeated. That sounds right. That is what you told me. I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet. But see, that is the thing about my confusion, I said. I wanted to be sure, so I went to the building manager. I asked him to pull the security footage. I saw the color drain from Dana's face. It happened instantly. The blood just vanished, leaving her skin gray and waxy. Lillian, put that away, Kirk said, stepping forward. We are not doing this. Doing what? I asked innocently. I am just sharing memories, like a family. I tapped the screen. The video was already queued up. I turned the tablet around so the screen faced the semicircle of relatives. This is 1:14 in the afternoon, I narrated. On the screen, Dana walked out of the elevator. She was dragging the black bag, the heavy black bag. That is you, Mom, I said. And that is a very big bag for a 20-minute visit. The room was silent. Aunt Caroline leaned forward, squinting. I fast-forwarded, I said, swiping the timeline. This is 4:46 in the afternoon. On the screen, Dana walked out, no bag. 3.5 hours later. 3.5 hours, I said to the room. You were in my apartment for 3.5 hours while I was at work. What were you doing? Mom? This is absurd, Dana stammered. Her voice was getting higher, thinner. I fell asleep. I took a nap on your sofa. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to worry you about how tired I was. You took a nap? I asked. And the bag? The one you walked in with but didn't walk out with? Did the bag take a nap too? I left it there, Dana shouted. I forgot it. My God. Lillian, you are filming me? You are stalking your own mother? You didn't leave it there, I said. Because I didn't find it, and neither did the fire investigators. I swiped to the next video, the basement, the storage locker, Dana shoving the bag inside. You hid it, I said, in the basement, and then 40 minutes later, a man in a fake trash truck came and took it away. The relatives were not looking at me anymore. They were looking at Dana. Aunt Caroline's mouth was slightly open. Uncle Bob was staring at the tablet with a look of dawning horror. She is lying, Kirk yelled. He marched into the center of the circle, standing over me. She manipulated the video. This is what we are talking about. She is sick. She is trying to frame us because she feels guilty about the fire. I looked up at Kirk. I didn't flinch. Speaking of the fire, I said, Grant, the fire investigator, found something interesting. He found the source of the spark. I looked back at the relatives. It was a timer, I said. A mechanical timer plugged into the wall behind my TV. It was set to 2:55 in the morning, exactly 3 minutes before the alarm went off. Lillian, stop it, Dana screamed. She stood up, knocking her tea over. Brown liquid spilled across the pristine coffee table. You need a doctor. You are hysterical. I am not the one screaming, I said calmly. I turned the tablet to show the last image, the photo from the hardware store. Kirk standing at the counter, the black bag in his hand. Here is Kirk, I said, buying the timer, paying cash, holding the same bag that Mom brought to my apartment. I looked at Uncle Bob. Bob, I said, does that look like a hallucination to you? Or does that look like a receipt? Kirk, Uncle Bob said, his voice deep and rumbling. Why did you buy a timer? It was for the Christmas lights, Kirk shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. I don't have to answer to you. This is my house. Get out. No, Dana said, her eyes wild. She pointed a shaking finger at me. She did this. She stole the timer. She is setting us up. Can't you see? She is evil. The mask was gone. The sweet, concerned mother had evaporated. In her place was a cornered animal, teeth bared, ready to tear out the throat of anyone who got too close. "You forged my signature," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "You stole my identity. You filed a fake HR report to get me fired. You tried to commit me to a mental institution so you could cash a check for $165,000. "I am your mother!" Dana shrieked. "I gave you life. Anything you have is mine." The room gasped. It was the admission. It wasn't a confession of the crime, but it was a confession of the motive. "Anything you have is mine." "Not anymore," I said. I stood up. "I am not signing your papers. Mom, and I am not going to a facility." Dana lunged for the papers on the table, as if grabbing them would somehow make the plan work. She clutched the unsigned power of attorney to her chest. "You are not leaving this house," Kirk said, stepping between me and the door. He looked big. He looked dangerous. "We are going to call the doctors. We are going to handle this tonight." "I don't think so," I said. "Sit down, Lillian," Kirk growled. He reached for my arm. Ding-dong. The doorbell rang. It was a cheerful, bright chime that cut through the tension like a knife. Kirk froze. His hand hovered inches from my arm. Dana stopped breathing. The room went deadly silent. "I think that is for you," I said to Kirk. The door, which I had left unlocked, opened. Grant Sloane stepped into the entryway. He was not alone. Behind him were 2 uniformed police officers and a detective in a suit. Grant looked at me, checking to make sure I was safe. Then he looked at Kirk. "Kirk Ralston?" the detective asked. Stepping forward, Kirk took a step back, stumbling over the ottoman. "Dana Ralston?" the detective continued, looking at my mother. Dana stood there, clutching the papers, the wet tea dripping onto the carpet. She looked at the police, and then she looked at me. Her eyes were not crazy anymore. They were cold. They were realizing that the game board had just been flipped. "We have a warrant for your arrest," the detective said, his voice filling the silent living room. "Charges include arson in the 1st degree, insurance fraud, and conspiracy." I watched Dana's face. I watched the moment she realized that the daughter she thought was a pawn had just taken the queen. "It is over, Mom," I said softly. Dana didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at me with a hatred so pure it felt like heat. "You ungrateful little bitch," she whispered. And for the first time in my life, her disapproval didn't hurt. It felt like victory. The silence that followed my mother's venomous whisper was broken by the sharp, mechanical ratchet of handcuffs. It is a sound you never forget. It is the sound of absolute finality. One of the uniformed officers stepped forward, took Dana's wrists, and pulled them behind her back. She did not fight physically, but her eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally, looking for anyone who still bought the act. "You are making a mistake," she hissed. The sweet maternal voice gone, replaced by a jagged edge. "My daughter is unstable. She edited those videos. She has a background in computers. She faked all of it to punish us." Grant Sloane stepped into the center of the circle, right where the tea had spilled. He looked at the family members, at Aunt Caroline, at Uncle Bob, at Cousin Sarah, who were sitting frozen in their chairs, their mouths slightly open, looking like statues in a museum of shock. "It is not just videos," Grant said, his voice calm, authoritative, filling the room. "We have the physical evidence chain." He held up a clear evidence bag containing the melted timer. "This is the ignition device," Grant stated. "It was recovered from the burn site. It is a General Electric mechanical timer, batch number 4092. It was fused in the on position at exactly 2:55 in the morning, 3 minutes before the alarm sounded." He turned to look at Kirk. "And we have the transaction log from Miller's Hardware on Route 19, Grant continued. "Video confirmation of Kirk Ralston purchasing this exact unit, with cash, while holding the black canvas bag that was used to transport the accelerant." "I didn't," Kirk stammered. backing up until he hit the mantle of the fireplace. I bought a timer for the garage lights. I don't know what she did with it. And then there is the access log, the detective added. Stepping forward with a clipboard, we have a digital footprint of the guest code used to enter the building. It was generated from Lillian's account, but the IP address traces back to a mobile device registered to Dana Ralston. The detective looked at Aunt Caroline, who was trembling. "Ma'am," the detective said gently, "these aren't hallucinations. These are forensics. These are data points that do not lie." Dana began to shout, a high, keening sound. "She set me up. She is jealous. She has always been jealous. She hacked my phone. She planted the IP address. You can't believe her." It was pathetic. It was the desperate thrashing of a narcissist who realizes the mirror has shattered. But even then, I saw a flicker of doubt in Uncle Bob's eyes. He looked at me, then at Dana. It was hard for them to accept that the woman who baked casseroles for the church social could be an arsonist. "If you think she faked the video," the detective said, cutting through Dana's screaming, "then perhaps you can explain the text messages." The room went quiet again. Dana closed her mouth. "We executed a warrant for your iCloud data 2 hours ago," the detective said. "We pulled the deleted messages from the cloud backup." He looked down at the paper in his hand. "Sent 3 weeks ago from Dana to Kirk. Do not let the girl change her email password. We need access for the notification." I felt a chill run through me. They had discussed it like a business transaction. The detective read the next one. "Sent last Tuesday, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. From Kirk to Dana. I bought the stuff at the hardware store. You just need to go into her apartment. I will wait in the car." Kirk's face turned the color of old ash. He slumped against the wall, his knees giving way. "And finally," the detective read, looking straight at my mother. "Sent at 4:50 in the afternoon, right after you left the building. Dana to Kirk. The timer is placed behind the cabinet. Set for 2:55. The bag is in the basement. Make sure the cleaning crew gets it." There was no coming back from that. There was no "Lillian is crazy" defense that could explain away a text message explicitly detailing the time of ignition and the location of the evidence. Aunt Caroline let out a sob. It was a wet, broken sound. She looked at her sister, and for the first time, I saw the realization hit her. "You brought us here," Caroline whispered. "You invited us here to help you lock her up." Dana didn't answer. She was breathing hard, her nostrils flaring. "You used us," Uncle Bob boomed, his voice shaking with rage. "You sat there and told us Lillian was sick. You told us she was a danger to herself. You made us part of your alibi." "I did it for the family," Dana screamed, finally dropping the pretense of innocence. "We needed the money. Kirk's business is under. We were going to lose the house. Lillian has a good job. She can bounce back. She is young. We are old. We needed it more." We needed it more. That was it. That was the justification. They burned my home, killed my pets, if I had any, and tried to destroy my sanity because they felt entitled to my stability. "You are sick," I said. It wasn't a scream. It was a statement of fact. "Kirk Ralston, put your hands behind your back," the second officer said. Moving in on my stepfather, Kirk didn't fight. He looked defeated, but as the cuffs clicked onto his wrists, he looked at Dana with pure venom. "It was her idea," Kirk blurted out. "I just bought the timer. She lit the match. She is the one who went inside. I told her it was dangerous." "You coward," Dana spat at him. "You spineless coward." They were dragged out of the living room, screaming at each other, blaming each other, tearing each other apart, just as they had tried to tear me apart. The flashing lights of the squad cars outside illuminated the living room in pulses of red and blue, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls where our family photos used to hang. I stood in the middle of the room. I looked at the table with the spilled tea and the unsigned power of attorney papers. Aunt Caroline stood up. She walked over to me. She looked like she wanted to hug me, but she stopped. She looked ashamed. "Lillian," she said, her voice trembling. We didn't know. She was so convincing. I am so sorry." "I know," I said. "She is very good at what she does." I picked up my purse. I didn't want their apologies. I didn't want their pity. I just wanted to leave this house, which had never really been a home, and never come back. "Goodbye, Aunt Caroline," I said. I walked out the front door, past the police cars where my parents were being shoved into the back seats, and walked to my rental car. Grant was waiting by the hood. "You did good," Grant said. "You held the line." "Is it over?" I asked. "The criminal part is starting," Grant said. "But the threat? The threat is over." 3 days later, I was sitting in Marla Kincaid's office again. The view of the city was the same, but the air felt lighter. Marla slid a document across the concrete desk. "Harborstone has formally voided the fraudulent change of beneficiary form," Marla said, sounding satisfied. "Based on the police report, the confession in the text messages, and the witness testimony from the clerk, they have reinstated you as the sole beneficiary of your policy." She tapped the paper. "They are expediting the claim. The check for $165,000 will be issued to you by Friday. They are also adding a settlement for the stress and the identity theft protocol failure. It is not a fortune, but it is an apology." "I don't care about the apology," I said. "I just want to pay off my mortgage and rebuild." "There is more," Marla said. "The district attorney is going for the throat because of the premeditation and the fact that it was an occupied dwelling in a multi-unit building. They are charging Dana with aggravated arson. That carries a mandatory minimum of 10 years. With the insurance fraud and identity theft stacked on top, she is looking at 15 to 20. And Kirk? Conspiracy to commit arson, accessory before and after the fact. He is trying to cut a deal by testifying against her, but he bought the device. He's looking at 8 to 10 years. "Good," I said. "And," Marla added, handing me a final sheet of paper, "this is a permanent restraining order. It bars them from contacting you, physically or electronically, for the rest of their lives. If they send a letter from prison, it goes straight to the trash. If they call, it is a felony." I took the paper. It was just a piece of paper, like the one they had tried to make me sign, but this one gave me freedom instead of taking it away. "Thank you, Marla," I said. "And thank Grant for me. Grant is already on another case," Marla said with a dry smile. "He likes fires. They are easier to understand than people." 6 months later, I unlocked the door to my new apartment. It was not in the Riverview lofts. I couldn't go back there. The memory of the smoke was too thick. I had bought a small townhouse on the other side of the river. It had brick walls and a small garden. It was mine. I walked inside and set my bag down. The first thing I did was walk to the keypad on the wall. Beep, beep, beep. System armed. I had installed a security system that would make the Pentagon jealous. Cameras in every room, motion sensors, glass break sensors, and a smoke detection system that was hardwired to the fire department with a redundant cellular backup. I walked into the kitchen and made a cup of tea. I sat by the window and watched the rain fall on the street outside. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought putting my parents in prison would feel like winning the Super Bowl. But it didn't. It just felt quiet. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I didn't have to wonder if the people who were supposed to love me were actually calculating my net worth. The check from the insurance company had cleared. I had replaced my clothes. I had bought new furniture. I had even started writing again. But the biggest thing I had recovered wasn't the money. I looked at the reflection of myself in the window. I saw a woman who had been told she was crazy. A woman who had been told she was confused, broken, and weak. They were wrong. I sipped my tea. The fire took my history. It took my photo albums and my favorite sweater. But it gave me something back. It gave me the absolute, unshakable knowledge that when the alarm rings, I know how to save myself. I don't need them. I never did. And as I sat there, safe in a house that I had secured with my own hands, I realized that was the best revenge of all. I was happy, and they were in a cage they built for themselves. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that burning hallway to this quiet room, and I appreciate you walking through the ashes with me. If this story made you look at your own safety differently, or if you just love seeing justice served cold, please let me know in the comments. I want to know where you are listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Kate Revenge Stories and like this video to help us grow. And if you really want to support the channel and help more people hear these stories of survival, please hit that hype button. Stay safe, trust your gut, and check your smoke detectors.